Hello. We're going to look back now, and we're going to pick up some things we skipped over. Flip over to page 137, and we're going to look at infinitives today. Okay? There are two forms of the infinitive in Hebrew. There's an infinitive absolute, and there's an infinitive construct. Now, what does that mean? We'll get into that. For now, let's look at patterns again. And again, we're trying to kind of do some detective work and recognize patterns so that then when we're in the text, we can pay attention to those things. Okay? Let's review some of the patterns that are related to the construct. That would be the participle. What's the pattern for the participle? The pattern for the participle is OA. Okay? What would that be then? It's a short O and a long E. Okay? So coattail. And remember that usually the participle can capture a lot of meaning, but a lot of times if it's verbal, then it implies ongoing action. Or it can function as a noun, so it can be like the writing one or the scribe. Or it can be adverbial, and so it functions like an adverb. So someone was, you can look back at the lessons for the participle if you want to. But for now, remember that the pattern for the participle is OA. Okay? And remember also that the participle is only inflected for person, no, for gender and number, okay? So there's no person implied here. A person is implied by context. So you would only ask the question, what's the gender? Is it masculine, feminine? And what's the number? Is it singular or plural? So this is the singular masculine form, coattail, OA. The clue for the infinitive absolute is A-O. So for the participle, it's OA. For the infinitive absolute, it's A-O. And the extra clue for the infinitive absolute is that most of the time, there is a mater letter here. You're not going to see that kind of extra piece almost anywhere. And so if you see the mater O, that's a big clue that this is an infinitive absolute. So it is a comets, long A, and a long O. Ka-tol. So O-A, A-O. Coattail, participle. Ka-tol, infinitive absolute. Okay? Final, infinitive construct. Now, there's a lot of overlap in the infinitive construct with the imperative as well, which is, remember, is the second person volative form. And in the imperative, what's the pattern for the imperative? The pattern is that it looks like the imperfect, but the first letter, the first consonant, drops off. So, for instance, yiktol, you drop off the first yod, and you would have katol. In the infinitive construct, it's similar, but there's some slight differences. But in the basic pattern, it's the same. Shava, so little o. O. Okay, so let's review. So O-A, participle. A-O, infinitive absolute. And E-O, infinitive construct. Okay, so let's fill this one in. Shiva and Holam. Okay? All right, so what do we do with this now? The infinitive absolute, let's start there since this is where the textbook starts. So take a look at, you can look through all the, if you look at 2a, you can look through all the different variations on it, and you'll see that even with gutturals and first nuns and first yods and hollow verbs, it pretty much stays the same. You pretty much have the A-O all the way throughout, and the clue of the mater O stays the same, except for the third hey. So if you look at the very last one, banol, there's no mater there, but you still have the ao pattern that you can help figure out. If you look briefly at the hollow verb, then the clue is a holem vav, a o. There's no a because it's a hollow verb, but you have that mater o. And in hollow verbs, I don't think you would ever have a holem vav in the middle root for the root. It would always be an u or an e. So this is pretty unique. So if you see com or I guess for bo, there's a holem vav there. But for the most part, if you see a holem vav, a long o, a mater o, then that gives you a clue that that's an infinitive absolute. Okay, but that's not even the biggest clue. In both cases, for the infinitives, you're not going to see these very often, but when you do, there's going to be a big clue nearby that will let you know that something different is happening. So take a look at 2b and take a look at 1, okay? The infinitive absolute is paired with a finite verb form of the same root to intensify the verbal meaning. It is translated by an adverbial intensifier such as certainly, truly, surely, indeed. Now, briefly, an infinitive in English. Do you know what an infinitive in English is? An infinitive in English would be the construct to be, or to walk, or to eat, adding the to that. And that's kind of how the infinitive construct works, but the infinitive absolute is totally unique. There's nothing like it in English. So this is a great opportunity to kind of get into the mind of the Hebrew thinker, the Hebrew worldview. So basically what they're saying here is usually you'll see an infinitive absolute with a regular verb, usually a perfect verb, sometimes an imperfect verb, and the infinitive absolute acts to intensify the meaning of that regular verb. And so that's why usually when we translate it in English, we'll translate it with the word surely, certainly, truly. Okay? But it's only modifying the main verb. You're not going to see an infinitive absolute hanging out by itself very much. And if you do, then it's best to just consult a commentary to understand exactly what's happening there. So flip over to page 138, look at the very beginning at the top. And we're just going to look at example 2, okay? Shamor tishmeru et torati. So we know the last part, et torati, my Torah, my law. But let's look at those first two words, okay? Shamor, what's that? Is that a perfect? Is that an imperfect? Is that an imperative? Oh, it's an infinitive absolute. O, shamor. And the mater o is the clue there. So that's the infinitive absolute. And if it's paired, remember, if it's paired with a regular verb, in this case it's an imperfect verb, then it acts to intensify it, okay? And so let's take a look at the second word, tishmeru. That is a second person masculine plural, imperfect, from shamar, to keep, okay? It's kal as well. And that means you, plural, will keep. So without the absolute at the beginning, it would be you will keep my law. But with the shamor on the beginning, with the infinitive absolute there, it intensifies the meaning of that main verb. So it goes from you will keep my law to you will certainly, you will surely keep my law. And remember, the clue in this case is that there are two verbs of the same root. They both have the root shamar. One is the infinitive absolute, the other one is, in this case, an imperfect verb. Let's look at example 3. This comes straight from Genesis 2, when God gives Adam rules for keeping the garden. And he says, if you can eat from any fruit of this tree, and actually in that construction, there's an infinitive absolute there. You may freely eat from any tree in the garden. It's incredible openness and opportunity. It's in a very intensive meaning there. You can eat whatever you want. But, he says, on the day that if you do, on the day that you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. So there's great freedom on the one hand, but also great punishment on the other hand if the boundaries are overstepped. So looking back at example 3, mot tamut. Now, which one is the infinitive absolute? Remember, with hollow verbs, the root here is mut, to die. With hollow verbs, the infinitive absolute only shows up with the holem vav, with the second part of the ao clue. So the first word is the infinitive absolute, mot, and the second verb is an imperfect. What kind of an imperfect is it? It's a second person, masculine singular, imperfect kal verb from mut, to die. You will die. And with the infinitive absolute, it becomes you will certainly die. So we add that extra English word to help us capture that intensive meaning. But in the Hebrew, it's even more evident because it's using two words of the same root. And together, the infinitive absolute with the regular verb, it communicates a very intensive idea. Okay? It can also show up with imperatives, as you can see in example 4. Shim'u shamoa. The first verb is an imperative. Shim'u. Hear, from shama, listen. And in this case, the infinitive absolute comes second. And if you flip back, you can see that third guttural verbs with the infinitive absolute, they have that furtive patach, that extra little kind of a blip at the end. So that's why it goes shamoa at the very end. So together, if we just had the imperative, it would be listen, hear. But with the infinitive absolute, it makes it more intense. So it means keep on listening, truly listen, pay close attention. Shim'u shamoa. Okay? And then if you look at number 2 on page 138 at the top there, it says the infinitive absolute can substitute for any appropriate verb tense as determined by context. So that means that sometimes, very rarely, they'll just throw in an infinitive absolute to act as a normal verb, but it looks like an infinitive absolute, and you have to use context to determine what it relates to and who is acting on the verb. So it's kind of a wild card, as they say. So don't worry about that too much. You can always look that up in lexicon or with Bible software to figure out that. But most of the time, you're going to see an infinitive absolute paired with a regular verb to make its meaning more intense. Okay? Now let's take a look at the infinitive construct. Okay? So look at paragraph 3, the infinitive construct on page 138. As its name implies, the infinitive construct is essentially a verbal noun. So it can function as an infinitive, which would be our English to eat, to sit, but it can also function as a verbal noun, which is related to the participle, in that we would translate it with the ending ing. So sitting, standing, eating, okay? So the infinitive construct, what's our pattern again? Shava o. E o. Okay, it's a short O. It's actually a long O. What would I say? So you can compare it with the infinitive absolute. A o. E o. Okay. And let's compare it with the imperative, since we said that they look the same sometimes, but there's also some clear differences. So let's look at number 2 there, A2 under infinitive construct. Okay, the regular, that's when it's going to be the most difficult to determine whether it's an imperative or infinitive construct. The infinitive construct there you can see is ketol. Ketol. The imperative is ketol. Okay? But it changes in second guttural, okay? If you look at the next one, second guttural, that means that the second root letter is a guttural. In this case, it's a chet. So infinitive construct is bechor, et-o, bechor. But the imperative, as we know, if you remember, in second guttural roots, with the imperative, the o changes to a patach, to a short a. So it goes. So instead of bechor, the imperative is actually bechar. Okay, just slight differences. You can always look these up. There are several tables in the book and in other reference grammars that you can flip through and make sure you're looking at the right thing. And you can compare, say, how does the infinitive construct look in second guttural verbs? How does the imperative look in second guttural verbs? And you can check those out. I don't remember them all the time, but it's helpful to be able to know about it so you can reference and figure out what's going on. And then in third guttural forms, I mentioned briefly that in third gutturals, so in this case it's an ayin in Shema, it adds that furtive patach, that last little patach that kind of dips in. So in the infinitive construct, it's shemoah. Shemoah. In the imperative, same thing, changes to a patach. It would be shema, which that's pretty familiar. That's the imperative. Listen, hear, shema. Infinitive construct is shemoah. Okay? With first yod, so flip over to page 139, with first yod and some first nun roots, the infinitive takes a segelet form, which segelet means two segels. Okay? So segelet, two segels, two short vowels. And they would lose the initial letter and add a tav at the end. Okay? So example 5, the root yashav, the infinitive construct would be shevet. Yalad, example 6, would be ledet. Halak, example 7, would be leket. So we're losing the first root letter, which often happens, if you remember, oftentimes in first yod and first nun verbs, we lose that first letter. But the clue is that tav at the end. The clue is the double segol and the tav at the end in all these cases. That tells us that it's an infinitive construct. Example 8, nasa changes to sa'at, or sa'at. So that, in this case, it changes from two segels to two patach, but they're still both short vowels, okay? In this case, it's because it has a ayin, and gutturals prefer a sounding vowels. So, example 9, lakach changes to kachat. So again, we see the two patachs. We know that hate is a guttural, and it likes a sounding vowels. And then we see the tav at the end, kachat. Example 10, nasa. This is a unique one because the aleph quiesces. It kind of dissolves and just kind of hangs out in the background. It doesn't actually take a full vowel. So this one changes to sate, okay? And you can see right next to it, it went from two segels, and when the aleph quiesced, it lengthened the first segel and made it a tzere, so sate. And then example 11, tain. Sorry, tate. Natan to tate. And this is kind of a difficult one. We're left with only one root letter, one letter left over from the root, from Natan, and that's the middle one. And you can see right next to it, it changed. It started with Tainet, but when you say that a lot, Tainet, Tate, okay, so it just kind of assimilates, and you're left with Tate. To give, infinitive construct. Now, when we learned hollow verbs, hollow roots, we actually learned the roots of the infinitive construct. So here you don't need to learn anything new. So for verbs like, if you look at for on page 139, example 12, cum. That's the infinitive construct. Cum, to arise, or arising. Bo, to come. It's the same. That's the root, and that's the infinitive construct. Sim, to set, to place. That's the infinitive construct. And then look at number 5. This is just a small thing. Third hay roots, so verbs that end in hay, show a final oat, which we shouldn't be too surprised about because we know that hay and tav are related. Okay, so they're a little bit interchangeable. So bana, to build. The infinitive construct is benot. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to look at adding pronominal suffixes. Okay, so this happens sometimes. For example, if you were to take indefinite, so take a look down below. So katalo, kotlo. His killing. So it's infinitive construct, killing, and you're adding a pronominal suffix there to the end to show who's doing the action or who the action is doing, to whom the action is being done. So remember, so this pattern is also important to remember, okay? And it's a little bit unique. It's a short O. It's a kametz chatuf. It's not a regular kametz. And you know that because we didn't talk about the kametz chatuf a lot, but especially in the first syllable of a word, if it's a closed syllable, meaning that there's in the second letter there is a silent shava, so it closes the syllable, then that gives us a clue that it's a short O. Okay, so let's see where I can write here. So kot lo. So short O, kot, shava, silent shava, O. This is the pronominal suffix. Okay, and this shouldn't be too surprising, just because we know that when we add suffixes to verbs and to nouns, some shifting happens. So I don't know exactly why this occurs, but it looks like it flips. So remember, there's an O up here and a shava. So shava, O, et O, and then when you add a suffix, it kind of flips. It goes O, E, and then the suffix. Okay? So take a look at some of those examples. So B1 on page 139, infinitive construct ketol, et O. If you add a pronominal suffix, it changes to kotlo. Or her killing, kotla. So it's a closed syllable, so we know it's a short O sound. Your killing is kotlaka. And your killing, or I guess it can also be killing you, so there's a little bit of ambiguity there as to who's doing the action, if I'm doing the action or if it's being done to me. Kotlek in the last one, okay? And then you can read the rest if you want to. This is getting a little bit into the nitty-gritties, but let's plow through, and then there's a big helper, a big clue that we're going to talk about at the end. Segolite patterns. So let's look at page 140. Number 2, segolite pattern. Infinitives behave as segolite nouns in adding pronominal suffixes. So segolite, remember, is the double segol, okay? So infinitive construct shevet, which we learned is, if you flip back, that's from the root yeshav, to dwell, and we lose the first yod, and it becomes shevet. If you add a pronominal suffix to that, it becomes shivto, okay? Kachat, from lakach, to take. You lose the first lamed because it acts like a first noon verb. That's one of the weird exceptions. And you add a pronominal suffix to that, and it becomes kachto, his taking, or taking him. And then the best one, that from Natan, infinitive construct tate. Only one letter remaining from the root. With the suffix, it becomes tito. Okay. Thankfully, number 3, hollow verbs and third hay roots pose no problems when adding suffixes. So cum, to arise or arising. You add a suffix to that, kumon, his arising. Or, but note, kumi is the feminine singular arise imperative, okay? Kumi, feminine singular arise, and that looks like kumi, my arising. So that's one overlap between the forms. So maybe circle that on number 3, just so you can orient yourself if it shows up in one of the exercises. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to finally answer, what do we do with the infinitive construct? So we said infinitive construct functions as a verbal noun, corresponding to the syntactical use of the English infinitive, which is adding the helper word to, so to eat, to sleep, or a gerund, which is the ing ending, okay? Or a gerund, however you say that. And this is the big helper clue. So we're finally there. This is the thing to cling on to. One of the biggest clues for figuring out if something is an infinitive is that it often has a prefix lamed. Yes. And that basically supplies the that to that we have in English. So to eat, to sleep. The lamed functions as that to. Okay. So look at C1, example 20a. Ba liktol oti. He came, ba, liktol, to kill, oti, the et with the pronominal suffix, me. He came to kill me. So thankfully, there's nothing weird that happens here. So we add, so in this case, over here, infinitive construct, if you add the lamed, a hierarch there, and the rest is the same. It's great. It's wonderful. And then example 20b, if you don't have the direct object marker ot or et with this suffix, you can also attach the suffix to the infinitive construct. So that's example 20b. Ba lekotli. Okay, so that's this second example here. The a, so it's flipped. Okay, when we add a suffix. So he came, ba, le, to, kotl, really, to kill, kotli, to kill me. Ba le kotli, he came to kill me. Okay? So, all that to say, the clue oftentimes is that lamed preposition. Okay? you can go ahead and read through all the rest of that stuff, but mostly use this as reference, and this might be helpful when you're actually doing some of the exercises, but this gets pretty detailed because the infinitive can function wildly differently in different contexts. So I don't want to confuse you at this point. I mostly just want you to remember the pattern. Without a suffix, it's e, o, and with a suffix, it's o, shiva, o, a, and then the suffix. Okay. So read through those next kind of 2 pages, page 141 through 143, and that'll help you a little bit. But when you're actually working with the text, the biggest clue is often going to be the lamed preposition, or sometimes another preposition. Okay? All right. I'll be back in a sec.